Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.
Hello and welcome back to Undercurrent, which this week sees me, unfortunately, working on my tan here in the city. Well, in the past year in the media, we have seen an increase in attention to drug labs in our suburbs. Scott O'Keefe reports.
With the number of clandestine drug labs increasing every day, are the community being put at more risk than they need to?
So I'll draw your attention firstly to the scene that faced me in late March this year when I turned up at the State Adult Burns Unit the day after my son had been caught in a clan lab explosion. It's frightening. It was scary for me. It was obviously scary for him. He could have easily died. He would have only had to take one step further forward and he wouldn't be with us today.
People in Western Australia or in other parts of the country, in remote locations, can access the internet where recipes and the ingredients required for these particular clandestine activities are freely available.
The main ingredients that you need is fairly limited where you can buy them, and sometimes they are sold out. But other ingredients that you can't get hold of, you can use a substitute, which doesn't work as well. The most dangerous part is making the ammonia gas, because you can't buy it without some sort of licence. In making the ammonia gas, you need to be able to cool gases in gas form into a liquid. So the most common way of doing that is using LPG, which means you've got open LPG sitting in a container. Very flammable, as you know, and I think that most of the explosions we hear about are probably from that going up. If you didn't need to use the LPG to make the ammonia gas, that would make the process a lot safer. The going price on the market is $100 for a tenth of a gram, which, if you smoke it, you go through that in a minute or two, a couple of minutes. It's very expensive. If you make your own, it works out a fraction of that. When you're buying from a dealer, you don't really know the purity of what you're getting. If you make it yourself, you know exactly what's there. If the products were a lot easier to obtain, people would just make their own. People wouldn't even notice. You wouldn't hear about explosions, and the police could focus on more important things like real crime.
The difficulty, and I've said this before about trying to restrict the chemicals, is that most of them are everyday products that people want to use legitimately, and they're sold by hardware stores in particular, and it's very difficult to put the onus on hardware store employees and checkout attendants, often many of them are young, to legitimise the purchase of a product. Now, I think simply asking for ID to purchase fertiliser or LPG is difficult, and it slows the process down. It doesn't really resolve anything. We found that although Project Stop is useful, a lot of meth addicts work their way around Project Stop and are able to buy pseudoephedrine-based products, which is why I've suggested that one option we could consider as a community is to make pseudoephedrine prescription-based.
Illegal drug manufacture is really very difficult because, well, there are some we know, and as published last year, we knew categorically that group of people was related to illicit drugs. We knew in the episode in March, 5 patients came in in one evening related to illicit drug. There is that is the tip of the iceberg. And then if you go beyond the illicit drugs into alcohol, then various times, one particular day I went to the launch of the McCusker Drugs and Alcohol in Youth, and I left the ward round, and at that day 60% of the people there were there because of alcohol-related injury.
I'd say alcohol brings out more violence in people, just from my own experience.
The next drug lab could be detected in your community, your street, or even next door. I'm Scott O'Keefe, reporting for Undercurrent.
Well, last year the Fremantle Prison played host to an amazing exhibition that talked about its most successful jailbreak. Now, whilst that exhibition has now closed, this next story will tell you all about those amazing Irishmen and their most miraculous escape. So many stories abound about the many great escape attempts made from within the thick and fortified walls of our Fremantle prison. But not for want of trying, very few of those escape attempts were entirely successful. But that was until a group of Irish lads came along. The Fenians were amongst the final group of convicts sent to Western Australia, and their daring prison escape was one of only 2 entirely successful escapes known in the history of the prison, and certainly the most international.
This is the remarkable story of the Irish Fenians who were sent to Fremantle Prison on the last convict ship ever sent to Australia, and how they escaped from this prison and made their way across the water to America.
Who were the Fenians?
The Fenians were a group of Irishmen, a secret organisation who were determined to rebel against the British occupation of their country. They wanted to create an uprising, but unfortunately they were squashed by the British. A number of these Fenians actually served in the British Army, so they were arrested for treason, and the sentence for that was actually death, but this was commuted to life, transportation to Western Australia.
So how exactly did they escape?
It's an extraordinary tale. The men languishing in the prison sent letters to America to their compatriots who were over there, pleading for them to assist them. The Irish in America decided to support their fellow countrymen and organised a rescue ship, which they disguised as a whaler, sailed right across the world, kept it disguised, and organised a rendezvous with the prisoners. On the day of the escape, that morning, the prisoners left the prison as if they were going out to their normal work parties. Instead, 2 horse-drawn buggies raced past, picked them up and took them down to Rockingham down south, where the whaling ship was waited to collect them. However, they were chased by the police once they set from the shore towards the ship. Finally, they got on board, they were chased again, a cannon was fired, but they were by that stage in international waters, and they made their way back to America.
Were they ever captured?
No, amazingly the Catalpa sailed, reached America, arrived in New York, and all 6 Fenians were welcomed as heroes. So apparently there was a crowd of up to 10,000 on the docks, and we've got an extraordinary model of the Catalpa, certainly not life-size, but it's on display in the exhibition.
So what is it about these lads that made their escape possible?
They were Irish, they were determined, they were committed. I think also there's a bit of the sheer luck involved that this story never got out to the public. The authorities certainly heard whispers that there was going to be a rescue attempt, but they decided to ignore it. So all these factors combined, plus the meticulous planning that went behind the scenes, contributed to their escape.
Well, these days we're always looking for more environmentally friendly and viable ways of powering our homes and indeed our lifestyles. Well, next up, Lucy Nichol took a closer look at the pros and cons of wind farms.
The wind turbines are getting larger and larger, with new models reaching around 190 metres towards the sky. They are supposed to provide us with a clean energy solution so that future generations will have a healthier environment, but new revelations reveal modern wind turbines may be posing a danger to people's health as we speak.
Look, I think we've got some great potential here in Western Australia, and we've currently got about 16 or 17 projects either operating or under construction or proposed throughout our state. And I think people get quite excited about the opportunities of having renewables in the energy market.
During the recent Senate inquiry into the social and economic impacts of rural wind farms, concerned community members brought evidence to light regarding the adverse health impacts they experience from living in close proximity to wind turbines, such as migraines, tinnitus, hypertension and heart attacks.
And then eventually heart palpitations, which were a massive concern.
There is a very serious problem. It's not proven, it's not established, but there's plenty of evidence suggesting that wind farms have a very, very serious effect on health. There's millions of papers on a careful study of the noise near wind farms. It's completely irrelevant, except it's a bit annoying, a bit upsetting. So what would I like to see? Pretty simple. I'd like to see the techniques that are used in measuring industrial vibrations applied to wind farms.
The wind industry has been developed based on the National Health and Medical Research Council statement, which states there is currently no published scientific evidence to positively link wind turbines with adverse health effects.
The context is a lack of evidence, so that statement isn't saying that there are no effects, it's saying we don't really know. And we'll await further evidence to find that out.
Here in Williams, they're currently testing wind speeds with plans for a wind farm with over 69 turbines, each measuring over 194 metres high. There are currently plans pending approval for wind farms in Kojonup, Dandaragan and Esperance.
150 kilometres south of Williams in Kojonup, neighbours are at war over the proposed Mooney's Hill Energy Wind Farm. One resident's property is set to be surrounded by 60 visible wind turbines.
For all the research that we've done, the health concerns are our major problem with the wind farm. We will be living adjacent to our knowledge 4 turbines, and it concerns us, as you see, we've got a young family, that if it does cause health problems, that we won't be able to live where we live.
We knew there was a proposed wind farm in the area, but not to this scale, and the information wasn't really available. They sort of kept it pretty quiet. I think the biggest thing is that a wind farm company being able to put up a wind farm next door, being 100 metres from our boundary, stopping all the neighbours in their farming operations for chemical application and fertilisers with aeroplanes, land values, health effects for our families and children, and even visual amenity, and even just probably one of the biggest things is also tearing the community apart. It's actually making it pretty hard in the Flatbox area at the moment. There's people not talking to each other and name calling and all that sort of stuff, and it hasn't done the area much good at all.
Frankly, what I'd like to see the state government do, because they have the capacity to do it, is to call for a moratorium on any more new wind farm developments unless they're sited further than 10 kilometres from residences, and at that distance that they would appear to be safe. So that's what I'd like to see, is that no more lives and people's well-being be endangered by this rush into wind energy, and they should just literally call a halt to it until more is known. The people in Kojonup, their view is undoubtedly changing as they become more aware of the impacts that these facilities are having on people's lives in the eastern states, where they're now living alongside these facilities.
With the possible introduction of the carbon tax set to make renewable energy even more attractive than the current rebates already do, perhaps we need to slow down and consider if wind farms really are the pretty blue-skied picture we see portrayed by the wind farm companies, or if they may in fact be a horror picture we may later regret. I'm Lucy Nichol, reporting for Undercurrent.
Well, this week in the hot seat with John Hammond at the Court Wine Bar is Rod Fitzgerald from SRG.
Rod Fitzgerald, thank you for joining me at the Court Wine Bar this afternoon.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
I'm probably taking you out of an incredibly busy day out of your life, haven't I?
Very busy day of my life today. I've got the kids. I'm actually Mr. Mum at the moment.
Rod,
having a bit of holidays.
Your story to some degree has always fascinated me, because you grew up in the town of Orange, didn't you, in New South Wales?
That's right.
And I remember you once telling me that you started at your insurance company, or wherever you were working at the time, sweeping the floors.
That's right.
Were you just pulling my leg, or was that for real?
No, that's true. When I finished Year 12 in Orange, I just went to the local CES office, they were called back then, Centrelink, and they offered me a casual job working for an insurance company called GIO, and they just wanted someone to clean out their storeroom.
And I imagine that when you started cleaning the storeroom back in Orange, you had no idea that you'd end up as a state manager in Western Australia.
No, I didn't even know what insurance was, John. I thought it was some sort of bank. So.
And for those of the viewers that don't know you, Rod, can you now tell them where you are now in terms of your professional career?
Yeah, well, I've got my own business. So I started that back in 2001, and started off with just myself, and now it's grown to 25 people, and it's a general insurance brokerage that specialises in looking after businesses.
And Rod, tell us about your sport. I mean, you've had a reasonably successful career in sport.
Yeah, I had an NRL contract for 3 years, which certainly was something that I aspired to as a kid. In more later years, I've taken up triathlon in the last decade, and been lucky enough to represent Australia in my age group.
Australia's witnessed a lot of devastating events lately, which have had a huge impact on the insurance community. And the obvious one is the Queensland floods. Now, your understanding, Rod, would most people in Queensland have been covered by an insurer for those floods?
Yeah, look, no, most people probably weren't. A lot of people that weren't covered for flood could have had the option and chose either ignorantly or just weren't aware that they could have actually paid extra money and got that extra cover, and that's really disappointing. And I really feel for those people, but it's about how much information can somebody get at the time of buying a policy. And you know, you now hear for things like insurance being sold over at cashiers and supermarkets and things like that. There's no advice there's no chance that consumers are going to get any advice at all.
And what about the recent fires in Margaret River?
Fire is a pretty common peril, and one that is generally covered by all insurance policies. So it's not like flood where there's ambiguity around what is a flood and what isn't.
And Rod, do you think there's areas of risk in our society which should be compulsory insured, such as
absolutely
being on a cycle? Recently, Shane Warne has said that all cyclists should be insured. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, I support him 100%.
So could a cyclist take out insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got another firm called Bikeshaw, which certainly is one of others. There are others out in the marketplace that have identified a need in that space.
And can you recall any bizarre insurance policies you've had to take? I've always been amazed that pets can be insured.
Yeah, that was probably 20 years ago when that product probably first hit the marketplace, but now it's pretty common. Most obscure thing, insuring against bad weather is probably the one that we get asked the most about. People holding concerts or major events where they've got pre-committed expenses, and people not turning up because of inclement weather. That one still comes around. Hole-in-ones, we've insured quite a few hole-in-one prizes at golf courses. It's quite interesting to see the sorts of things that people do ask to get insured and what you can buy.
And you've got 3 young children that are taking up a bit of your time.
Yeah.
They're here today and they've been incredibly well behaved, right?
Yeah, they're down in the bar area there looking after themselves, which is good.
Is that their mother's good influence, do you think?
I think so, yeah. Look, I'm probably more the rat bag of the family. I'm the 4th child, as my wife likes to say. But yeah, look, my personal goals probably are to be able to have more time with them as their kids. As you know, they grow up pretty quick. So look, school holidays and things like that, I'd like to be available if I could, and certainly establish myself in my career where I can take that extra time off. Career-wise, there's still a few things to conquer yet.
Yeah, Rod, thanks for shedding a light on the insurance industry that I think a lot of people wouldn't have heard before. Yeah. And thanks for joining me at the Court Wine Bar this afternoon.
Thanks, John. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Undercurrent. Gee, time flies when you're having fun. We certainly hope you've enjoyed looking back on some of the best stories from our very first year on Undercurrent. But if there is anything you would like to see again, then please let us know. Drop us a line on our Facebook page, on Twitter, or our website, wtvperth.com.au. I'm Christy Mollica, and I can't wait to see you next week for more of Western Australia's very own Undercurrent.
Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.